December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
A date which will live in infamy, a day to be remembered as a day of loss. That's all it took to start the idea of internment camps. On February 19th, 1942, Executive Order 9066 was announced by Franklin D. Roosevelt. This marked the day that the U.S. strayed from their core beliefs by arranging the sending of people with Japanese ancestry in America to relocation camps. The Japanese internment in America was an excessive and unnecessary use of force and racism, as well as going against the core beliefs that the United States of America were founded on, including all men and women being born equal. These Japanese internment camps in America were nothing short of an unfair and unjust use of power and force by the U.S. government and military. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, the U.S. as well as its citizens needed answers. People of Japanese descent were forced to move from their everyday lives into a prison-like home, destroying their sense of community and displacing families. While not as harsh as prisons meant to keep convicted criminals, internment camps housed horrible living conditions, including being surrounded by barbed wire and watchtowers, having limited privacy, sharing facilities, and limitations on their work and actions. Japanese American citizens were given a 48-hour notice from Executive Order 9066 till they are forced to evacuate and or be detained by the U.S. military. There are 10 total internment camps being held in the western United States. Some of these places were in Arkansas, Arizona, California, Colorado, Utah, Idaho, and Wyoming. The racism and discrimination was a completely and unnecessary and unjust way to have treated Japanese Americans. Over 100,000 Japanese Americans were forced to be taken from their homes, forced to live in relocation camps. This process of selection wasn't just people who were suspected of being spies or criminals, it included everybody. People who were officially American citizens were taken just because of their heritage. These people faced discrimination not only before and during this time, but after. These stayed in place for almost 4 years until President Harry S. Truman signed Executive Order 9742 on June 25, 1946. This executive order demanded the liquidation of the War Relocation Authority and allowed Japanese Americans to return to their homes. However, even though they were released, many people, once returning home, came to see their home and belongings either stolen, sold, or destroyed. They were also faced with discrimination and racial prejudice, even though they themselves did nothing wrong. This is similar to how Jews were treated when they returned home from the Holocaust. On top of this, Japanese internment camps marked the time in which the U.S. went against the core beliefs that it was founded on. While not being a legally binding document, the Declaration of Independence shows what the U.S. was founded on and the ideology that we try to uphold. One specific piece from the Declaration was that it asserts the inherent rights of all people to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These were all taken from Japanese Americans who were sent to internment camps. No longer could these people live their lives normally or freely, but even when they returned home, things were different. The U.S. loves to promote the idea of freedom and opportunity that they offer while essentially having taken it away from others. To confirm that they were wrong, in 1988, Congress themselves passed the Civil Liberties Act, officially apologizing for the internment of Japanese Americans while including reparations of a $20,000 payment to those who were affected. At the time, the U.S. government cited national security and wartime crisis as the reason for the creation of these camps. At the time, the Supreme Court also ruled in favor of the creation, but with the information we know now, it is clear that it came in violation of many constitutional rights of Japanese Americans. Some of these include due process, involving how no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, property, without due process of law. Another would be equal protection, which states how everyone will be treated equally under the law. It also came in violation of freedom of movement, right to assemble, freedom of speech, and religious freedom. This shows the real reasons for Japanese American internment. These can include racial prejudice and wartime hysteria leading to the hasty and ill-advised decision to start the camps. This is not the military crisis that was shown by the government in the case that the Japanese were to be put in these relocation camps. To contradict this, however, it did calm the American people, giving them a sense of security throughout a time of overall panic. Although this shows how the Japanese internment in America was an unnecessary and unjust use of power and discrimination, as well as violating the core beliefs of the United States of America.